Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, Innistrad Midnight Hunt spoiler season continues, and yeah, we've seen some really exciting things, including Cultivator Colossus, which, yeah, it's a green mythic, it's broken. Make sure you check that episode out at some point. And bright and early this morning, I did an episode on Blood Vial Purveyor, who wants to give you blood. Okay, that was terrible. But yeah, I promise I only do that once in that episode, so will you still watch it? Maybe? I don't know. That's a pretty terrible impression. Anyways, on this episode, I'm going to be talking about Henrika Domnathi / Henrika Infernal Seer, because obviously, with the title of this episode, if you didn't realize it, with this new commander, you will flip her. You're gonna flip the commander because there's two sides to it. Get it? Okay, no, I'm terrible this morning. Anyways, let's jump into it. So Henrika Domnathi is a 1/3 vampire with flying that costs 2 black. She has at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Each player sacrifices a creature, you draw a card and you lose 1 life, or transform Henrika Domnathi. But before we jump to the backside of this card, let's first focus on the front. This trigger happens at the beginning of combat, which, unfortunately, in mono black, you really don't have any ways to use and abuse that trigger. Like, you can't get extra turns, really, you can't get extra combat, so unfortunately, you're pretty much limited to just getting that once. Or should I say, okay, once a turn. Yes, you can get this up to 3 times, but there are ways to get it more throughout the game, but we'll talk about those here in a bit. The first is that each player has to sacrifice a creature, and yeah, you're in mono black, so actually you've got plenty of ways to actually benefit from this, whereas your opponents probably won't. The second is only benefiting you. You draw a card and lose 1 life, and like I've said many times before, in Commander, 1 life is well worth 1 card. And of course, again, the third one is to actually transform Henrika, so let's flip her over to Henrika Infernal Seer. Henrika Infernal Seer is a 3/4 vampire still with flying, death touch, and lifelink, so she gained death touch, lifelink, and some good power and toughness. And by paying 1 black, each creature you control with flying, death touch, and or lifelink gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So on the backside, we've got basically a slightly bigger vampire Nighthawk, but one that can actually pump our entire team, or I guess I should say, are flyers, death touchers, and or lifelinkers, which again, if you're building a deck around Henrika, yeah, you're probably going to want a lot of those. Now, a big thank you to Eddie for all the discussions around these cards, and actually, as Eddie pointed out to me, yeah, if you've got infinite black mana, which, you know, there's plenty of ways to do in Magic, you win with this commander as long as you can swing through in combat and have enough creatures to take all your opponents out. That being said, as Eddie and I also discussed, there are other mono black commanders out there that are basically even more efficient at taking out your opponents and are essentially guaranteed to do so when you've got infinite black mana, like, you know, Turgrid or Sir Conrad, etc., etc. So yeah, if you're looking for an infinite mana win condition mono black commander, you could use this, obviously, but there are other options. But yeah, in my opinion, it looks like Henrika is more so the type of commander that really wants you to go wide with a bunch of flying, death touch, lifelinking creatures. Again, they don't have to have all of them, they just have to have at least one to get pumped by Henrika. So let's jump in and talk about some cards that can work well with this commander. Or actually, and I forgot the order that I put these things, so my apologies. First up, I just wanted to point out that this commander is somewhat along the lines of a Demonic Pact type of card. Demonic Pact says at the beginning of your upkeep, choose one that hasn't been chosen. It deals 4 damage to our creature or player, you gain 4 life, target opponent discards 2 cards, draw 2 cards, or you lose the game. Basically, like Demonic Pact, you have to choose one that hasn't been chosen, so you can't just keep picking to draw a card and lose a life, or make everyone sacrifice a creature. You have to kind of go down the line and at least pick all of them until you transform, and then you've got no more options. That being said, I do have a way around this that I'd like to bring up, and yeah, we'll get to that here in a second. Before that though, again, we kind of have seen a somewhat similar commander in mono black with Rankle, Master of Pranks, though Rankle doesn't have that same limitation. Because Rankle's trigger has whenever it deals combat damage to a player, choose any number. So yeah, you can pick whatever you want, you're not just picking one. And yeah, you're not limited to just pick each one of these once, and on top of that, there are ways to use and abuse this with something like, oh, I don't know, Double Strike, where you can get this twice. That being said, yes, there are definitely some similarities between Henrika and Rankle, but they're gonna play pretty differently. So now that I'm remembering the order of things in this episode, let's talk about some cards that work well with this commander. First off, like I mentioned before, since you're in mono black, you've actually got ways to benefit, or actually ways to get around sacrificing creatures, or I shouldn't say get around, but take advantage of. So there are quite a few effects like Feign Death, which says, until end of turn, target creature gains. When this creature dies, return to the battlefield, tapped on toes, control they +1 counter on it. Or again, they are somewhat similar, not all of them give counters, but yeah, mono black's got plenty of ways to get a creature back if it's gonna die. And then Cauldron of Souls has tap, choose any number of target creatures, each of those creatures gains persist until end of turn. So essentially if those creatures didn't have -1/-1 counters on them, they come back into play with -1/-1 counters. So when you force everyone to sacrifice a creature, again including yourself, you can actually take advantage of that and get whatever death trigger your creature might have, or ETB that they have again, etc, etc. And of course you can actually just, if you want to utilize your commander multiple times to make players sacrifice creatures, just sacrifice your commander, after you've already, used Feign Death on it, so you just get it right back and then that resets your options. So with enough of these effects, if you really wanted to, you could just keep forcing players to sacrifice creatures over and over again without ever really transforming your commander. Next up though, another way to really take advantage of making players sacrifice creatures comes with Archfiend of Depravity. It says at the beginning of each opponent's end step, that player chooses up to 2 creatures they control, then they sacrifice the rest. So this keeps our opponent's creatures down to a very manageable number, and yeah, by keeping our opponent's creatures down to 2, if we can keep making them sacrifice more creatures, they're pretty much not going to have any here in a bit. Regardless though, let's move on and talk about some cards that can really help us after our commander has transformed. Now, unfortunately, in mono black, there aren't very many ways to actually give your creatures flying, and yeah, one of the ones that I did find is kind of expensive at around $10 with Eldrazi Monument. That being said, it is quite fantastic in this deck. It says creatures you control get +1/+1 and have flying and indestructible. And at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature if you can't sacrifice Eldrazi Monument. So again, in mono black, we've got plenty of ways to actually take advantage of sacrificing a creature and get a lot of value out of that. And pumping our team and giving them flying and indestructible is pretty fantastic. And again, keep in mind that, yeah, our commander can pump all of our flyers, death touchers, and lifelinkers, so giving them all flying can be quite nice. So of course, we can also include something that gives our entire team death touch, like Archetype of Finality. It says creatures you control have death touch, and creatures your opponents control lose death touch or can't have or gain death touch. So our creatures become incredibly deadly, and our opponent's creatures, well, can never be that deadly. And then Whip of Erebos is actually a way to give all of our creatures lifelink, and on top of that, obviously can reanimate creatures as well, temporarily, but still. Obviously, all we need is one of these types of anthems that gives either flying, death touch, or lifelink to impact our entire team and really help out our board, so that when we do pump with our commander, we're going to be pumping everyone. Or, we can just focus on making a lot of tokens that already have one of those keywords with things like Bitter Blossom, which, I'm sorry, this is really expensive, but I needed to provide a flying example, Ogre Slumlord, and Call the Bloodline. Yeah, right now Bitter Blossom's like a $45 card, so I don't see myself ever including this in a deck, even if it's reprinted down to oblivion, because yeah, this thing's gonna be expensive pretty much forever. But yeah, if you already have one, it's a fantastic addition to this deck. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 Black Fairy Rogue creature token with flying. For just 2 mana, yeah, this can give you a lot of flyers and a lot of value. And again, by flooding the board with flyers, you can have evasive creatures that you can pump and get through with a lot of damage. But then Ogre Slumlord is much more budget friendly. He has, whenever another non-token creature dies, you may create a 1/1 Black Rat creature token, and rats you control have Death Touch. So this can make us a ton of rats in absolutely no time, but keep in mind that those rats only have Death Touch if we keep Ogre Slumlord in play. And then Call the Bloodline has pay 1, discard a card, put a 1/1 Black Vampire Knight creature token with lifelink onto the battlefield, activates the ability only once each turn. So yeah, again, with our commander's pump effect, she definitely incentivizes us to go wide, and each of these can really help with that. But of course, we also have some one-off effects that can help us as well, like Abhorrent Overlord, Orzhov Enforcer, and Foundry of the Consuls. Abhorrent Overlord is a 6/6 flying demon that has, when it enters the battlefield, you put a number of 1/1 Black Harpy creature tokens with flying on the battlefield equal to devotion to black. And on top of that, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature, but yeah, that's gonna be well worth it in this deck because again, oh man, we can make a ton of harpies that have flying with this. And again, sacrificing a creature might not actually be a bad thing, and in fact, if we've got something like Feign Death, we can just, well, sacrifice the Abhorrent Overlord to its own sacrifice trigger, and then get it back to get more harpies, and just flood the board with tokens. Even a small creature like Orzhov Enforcer can be impactful as well, a 1/2 with Death Touch, so yes, this already gets pumped. And then it's also got Afterlife 1, so even if it dies, which again, maybe we sacrifice it with our commander's trigger, we get a 1/1 Spirit with flying. On top of that, how about Foundry of the Consoles? Just a simple land that can tap for a colorless or pay 5 and tap and sacrifice it to make 2 1/1 Thopters with flying. Again, in a monocolor deck, it's very easy to include utility lands like this. But yeah, I should also mention that once you flood the board with a ton of creatures, well, utilizing a lot of big mana effects in mono black can help you pump your creatures to oblivion and just, well, send your opponents to oblivion. And again, unfortunately, these are pretty expensive. I guess Black Market has been reprinted in Jumpstart, and that is like $4 or $5. But yeah, Cabal Coffers is definitely not cheap. Cryptghast is around $10 or so at this point, and yeah, Black Market around $5, so none of these budget friendly, unfortunately. But again, if you've got them around already, they can be effective with this commander to make a lot of mana, and yeah, pump your team, take out your opponents, and have fun. Regardless, now it's time for me to give you my final thoughts on Henrika. Now, Henrika is most definitely not an overpowered commander, but she can do some powerful things. Again, if you're set up properly, she can help you control the board by just continually getting her back and forcing opponents to sacrifice creatures. Or, you can sacrifice creatures that actually provide you value when they die or when you get them back too. On top of that, she can really help you finish out a game after you've flooded the board with either tokens or, creatures that have flying, Death Touch, or lifelink. And then you can just pump them, to at least, +2/+0 if you put 6 mana in. Once you get to 9 mana, that's +3/+0. And yeah, that's a lot of extra damage, especially when you've got a good amount of creatures on the board that you're pumping. So she's definitely not the most powerful commander from this set, but she's definitely not one to be ignored either. And with that, this show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.